Is your engine burning a quart of oil every 500 to 1,000 miles? Before you tear it apart or trade it in, there's a method that's been used by Japanese mechanics for decades to restore compression and reduce oil consumption without ever opening the engine. I've tried this on multiple high-mileage engines in my shop, and the results have ranged from impressive to surprisingly effective. Today, I'm going to walk you through exactly what this method is, how it works, why it works, and whether it's worth trying on your oil-burning engine. After over 20 years of diagnosing engine problems, I'm going to give you the real story, not the hype. Let's get into it. First, let's be clear about what we're dealing with. Oil burning happens for a few different reasons. The most common cause is worn piston rings. Over time, rings lose tension and can't scrape oil off the cylinder walls effectively. That oil gets pulled into the combustion chamber and burns. Another cause is worn valve stem seals. When these seals fail, oil leaks down the valve guides into the combustion chamber, especially on startup or deceleration. A third cause is excessive carbon buildup on the piston ringlands, the grooves where the rings sit. Carbon deposits can actually lock the rings in place so they can't expand and seal properly against the cylinder wall. If your rings are completely worn out or your cylinder walls are scored, no chemical treatment is going to fix that. You need a rebuild. But if your problem is carbon-locked rings or mild ring wear where the rings still have some life left, this Japanese method can actually help. The key is understanding what it does and what it doesn't do. So what is this method? It's called the piston soak or compression restoration treatment. The basic idea is to introduce a penetrating solvent directly into the combustion chambers through the spark plug holes. You let it soak for several hours or overnight. The solvent breaks down carbon deposits on the piston tops, ringlands, and cylinder walls. Once the carbon is loosened, you crank the engine to blow out the solvent and debris, then you run the engine and let it burn off any remaining residue. If carbon buildup was causing your rings to stick, freeing them up can restore compression and significantly reduce oil consumption. This isn't some internet magic cure. This is a legitimate mechanical cleaning process that Japanese mechanics have used for years, particularly on high-mileage engines with carbon-related ring sticking. Honda, Toyota, and Subaru engines especially benefit from this because many of them develop carbon buildup issues after 150,000 miles of normal use. Here's how you actually do it. I'm going to walk you through the process step by step so you can do this yourself if you decide it's worth trying. But first, a critical disclaimer. This process involves introducing chemicals into your engine. If you don't follow the steps correctly, you can cause damage. Use your head. If you're not comfortable working on engines, take it to a mechanic who understands this procedure. Step 1. Warm up the engine to operating temperature. You want the carbon deposits soft and the metal expanded. Run the engine for at least 10 to 15 minutes until it's fully warmed up. Then shut it off and let it cool for about 5 minutes. You don't want it so hot that the solvent immediately evaporates, but you want it warm enough that the carbon is pliable. Step 2. Remove all the spark plugs. Label the ignition coils or plug wires so you know which cylinder is which. Pull the plugs out and set them aside. This gives you direct access to the combustion chambers. Step 3. Rotate the engine so all pistons are roughly mid-stroke. You don't want any piston at top dead center because you're about to pour liquid into the cylinders and you need space for that liquid to pool above the piston. Use a breaker bar on the crankshaft bolt to manually rotate the engine if needed. Get each piston positioned away from the top of its stroke. Step 4. Pour the solvent into each cylinder. The most commonly used product for this is Berryman B-12 chem tool. It's a strong petroleum-based solvent that's specifically designed to break down carbon, varnish, and gum deposits. Some mechanics use a 50-50 mix of acetone and automatic transmission fluid. That's an old-school approach that also works. Others use dedicated piston soak products like Seafoam or GM Top Engine Cleaner. Whatever you use, pour about 2 to 3 ounces into each cylinder through the spark plug hole. Don't overfill. You just want enough to cover the piston top and seep into the ring grooves. Step 5. Let it soak. This is the critical part. You need to give the solvent time to penetrate the carbon deposits and soften them. Most mechanics recommend at least 12 to 24 hours. I've done soaks as short as 4 hours with mild results, and I've done 48-hour soaks with better results. The longer you let it sit, the more thorough the cleaning. During this soak period, the solvent is literally dissolving the carbon that's locking your rings in place. Step 6. Before you reinstall the spark plugs, you need to evacuate the solvent from the cylinders. This is important. If you try to start the engine with liquid sitting on top of the pistons, you risk hydraulic lock, which can bend the connecting rod. So here's what you do. Leave the spark plugs out, disconnect the fuel pump or fuel injectors so the engine won't fire, and crank the engine over for about 10 to 15 seconds. This pushes the solvent and loosened carbon out through the spark plug holes. It's going to make a mess, so put shop towels or rags around the plug holes to catch the spray. What comes out will be dark, dirty, and full of carbon chunks if the treatment is working. Step 7. Reinstall the spark plugs, reconnect everything, and start the engine. It's going to smoke. A lot. The remaining solvent and carbon residue will burn off through the exhaust. Let the engine idle for a few minutes, then take it for a drive. Keep RPMs moderate for the first 20 to 30 miles while everything clears out. The smoke will gradually subside as the combustion chambers clean up. Now let's talk about what this actually does mechanically. When piston rings get packed with carbon, they lose their ability to move freely in the ring grooves. Rings need to flex and expand to maintain contact with the cylinder wall. If carbon locks them in place, they can't seal. Oil gets past them, compression drops, and power suffers. The solvent soak breaks up that carbon, freeing the rings so they can move again. Once they're free, they can expand against the cylinder wall and do their job, seal combustion pressure, and scrape oil. This works best on engines where the rings aren't completely worn out but have lost effectiveness due to carbon buildup. I've done this on Toyota Camrys, Honda Accords, and Subaru engines with 150,000 to 200,000 miles that were burning a quart every 800 to 1,000 miles. After the treatment, oil consumption dropped to a quart every 3,000 to 5,000 miles in many cases. That's not perfect, but it's a huge improvement for a $20 can of solvent and a few hours of work. Let me give you a specific example. I had a 2010 Honda Accord with the 2.4-liter four-cylinder that was burning a quart of oil every 600 miles. The customer didn't want to rebuild the engine, and trading it in wasn't financially smart. I pulled the spark plugs and looked in with a bore scope. The piston tops were caked with carbon. The ring lands had visible buildup. This was a perfect candidate for a piston soak. I used Berryman B-12 chem tool, about 2 ounces per cylinder, and let it soak for 24 hours. When I cranked the engine to evacuate the solvent, what came out was black sludge, dissolved carbon mixed with the solvent. I reinstalled the plugs, fired it up, and let it smoke for 10 minutes. Then I drove it hard for about 50 miles to fully clear everything out. 2 weeks later, the customer called me. Oil consumption had dropped to a quart every 2,500 miles. That's not factory new performance, but it turned an engine that was on its way to the junkyard into something usable for another year or two. The treatment cost maybe $30 in materials and took me 2 hours. Compare that to a $3,000 engine rebuild or trading in the car at a loss. Now let's talk about what this method won't fix. If your piston rings are completely worn out, no tension left, physically damaged, or the ring gaps are excessive, this isn't going to help. If your cylinder walls are scored or glazed, solvent won't restore the crosshatch pattern that's needed for proper oil control. If your valve stem seals are shot, this treatment does nothing for that because the solvent doesn't reach the valve guides. The best way to know if you're a good candidate is to do a compression test before and after. If your compression is low due to carbon-packed rings, this treatment will bring it back up. If your compression is low due to worn rings or a blown head gasket, this won't change anything. I always recommend doing a dry compression test, then a wet compression test where you squirt a little oil into the cylinder and retest. If the wet test shows a big jump in compression, that tells you the rings are your problem and the piston soak has a good chance of helping. Let's also talk about risks, because there are some. If you overfill the cylinders with solvent, you can hydraulic lock the engine when you try to crank it. That can bend or break a connecting rod, and now you've turned an oil consumption problem into a catastrophic engine failure. So don't get carried away with the amount of solvent. 2 to 3 ounces per cylinder is plenty. Another risk is that if your engine has serious carbon buildup, breaking it all loose at once can clog your catalytic converter or oxygen sensors with debris. I've seen engines throw codes for cat efficiency after a piston soak because chunks of carbon made it through the exhaust system. It's rare, but it can happen. If your engine is really carboned up, you might want to replace the spark plugs after the treatment because they can get fouled during the burn-off phase. There's also the reality that this is a temporary fix for some engines. If the root cause of your carbon buildup is oil burning due to worn rings and you don't address that root cause, the carbon will come back. You might buy yourself 6 months to a year of reduced oil consumption, but eventually the problem will return. This is a band-aid, not a cure. But sometimes a band-aid is all you need to get another 30,000 or 50,000 miles out of a car before you're ready to replace it. Here's my professional take after doing this procedure dozens of times. The Japanese piston soak method works best on engines with 100,000 to 250,000 miles that have developed carbon-related ring sticking. It's most effective on engines that still have decent compression but are burning oil due to stuck rings. It's a low-cost, low-risk intervention that can extend engine life significantly if the underlying problem is carbon, not catastrophic wear. If your engine is burning oil and you're not ready to rebuild it or replace the car, this is absolutely worth trying. Worst case, it doesn't help and you're out $30 in a few hours. Best case, it cuts your oil consumption in half or more and buys you years of additional use. But you need to go into this with realistic expectations. This isn't going to turn a worn-out engine into a new one. It's not going to fix scored cylinders or broken rings. It's a carbon removal process that frees up stuck components. If carbon is your problem, this works. If wear is your problem, you need machine work. So here's what you need to ask yourself. Is your oil consumption sudden or gradual? If it happens suddenly, you might have a valve seal failure or a specific ring that broke. This treatment probably won't help. If it's been gradually increasing over the last 50,000 miles, that points to carbon buildup, and this method is worth trying. Have you been running cheap oil or skipping oil changes? That accelerates carbon buildup and makes you a better candidate for this treatment. Have you been using quality synthetic and changing on schedule? Then carbon is less likely to be your issue, and mechanical wear is more probable. One more thing. After you do this treatment, change your oil immediately. The solvent that makes it past the rings will dilute your oil and contaminate it with carbon particles. Don't run the engine for thousands of miles on oil that's been compromised by the cleaning process. Do the treatment, drive it for 50 to 100 miles to clear everything out, then do a full oil and filter change. Start fresh. Here's the bottom line. The Japanese piston soak method is a legitimate mechanical cleaning process that can restore compression and reduce oil burning when carbon buildup is the root cause. It's been used successfully for decades. It's low cost and low risk when done correctly, and it can save you thousands of dollars compared to an engine rebuild or replacement, if your engine is a good candidate for it. Have you tried a piston soak on a high-mileage engine? Did it work or did it do nothing? Drop a comment with your year, make, model, and what happened. I want to hear your results, good or bad. And if this gave you a potential solution to an oil-burning engine you thought was done for, hit that like button. Next week, I'm breaking down the truth about oil additives, which ones actually work, which ones are snake oil, and which ones can damage your engine. You don't want to miss that one. If you're not subscribed, hit that button now. Drop a comment. I respond to everyone. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.